I think if you're starting out now and you're looking to get into something, you have one or two choices. You can either be a wandering generality or you can be a meaningful specific.
Hello and welcome to the Jumpstart podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Sauer. Today's episode features a conversation with James Loomstein. And I have to say that a lot of what we heard from James was like looking into a digital mirror. It'd be cool to have one thing in common with James, but we have so many things in common that it almost seems creepy. But I guess, the good kind of creepy? Question mark? Not sure. We'll learn about James' career, but for this intro I wanted to talk about a specific date. June 12th, 2009. The day that James was let go from the great big agency that he had been working for. His platinum status with American Airlines, clients on both coasts, fancy meetings, great dinners, all of it was gone. So he went back home to his wife and 3-month-old, the firstborn child, and he figured out what to do next. So he took a leap of faith and decided that he's not going to go back to his previous path. He decided to quit being a wandering generality and become a meaningful specific. From tiny college auditoriums to Madison Square Garden, we bring you the story of a hustler, of a family man who adapted to all the challenges that he faced. We learn life and business lessons and arrive at one simple fact. You don't have to be the best in the world to succeed. You just need to be the best in your world. Today's episode is sponsored by Analytics Course. I gotta say that this is some of my best work yet. I've been recording videos every single day here in Buenos Aires to do my Google Analytics course. We're gonna have over 30 videos. We're doing monthly webinars. We have a private forum. Everything's vibrant and really just working my butt off to make this course a good one. And so I hope that you join me and sign up for Analytics Course at analyticscourse.net, where you can learn Google Analytics from the ground up. We have beginner, intermediate, and advanced lessons. We go and get you Google Analytics certified by taking the exam together. And then we top it all off with some bonus lessons where we teach you some of the more advanced topics when it comes to Google Analytics. And if you get this in time, there might even be some early bird pricing. So looking forward to having you in class. Hey, we're here today with James Loomstein. James, thanks for joining us on the podcast.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for having me today.
Yeah, it's great. We were talking before we started recording, and it's interesting how much we have in common. And so I'm looking forward to seeing how this all comes together. And so what I like to do with the podcast is to start off with a question that helps me understand a little more about where you're coming from. And that is, when is the first time you remember that you knew that you could get people interested in what you have to say from a marketing standpoint? What was the first project or the first opportunity you had where you're like, this is the right thing for me to do?
So I always knew I had a passion or an interest in marketing over going into other careers. I always liked persuasion and coming up with that killer idea. When I came out of college, not everybody really knows what they want to do. I got the marketing degree in college and position in consulting and like everybody else who comes out of college, but I didn't get the real PR job or got the first job out of, with the advertising agency. I didn't take that role and that route here. And so what happened is I was working in a consulting company and I said, I'd really like to get into this advertising world, this marketing world. And back then, in the late 90s, early 2000s, it was really hard to get into that space. Like you either started in that world or you didn't. And I ended up going back to graduate school at the time. And that is what really propelled me over from consulting world and the sales world over into this hardcore marketing, digital advertising world.
Yeah, interesting. So it sounds like education did influence what you were doing, but it was not maybe in the undergrad level, or there were some things you learned there, but it was when you went back and said, I really want to get concentrated on this, that it started to open up those doors for you.
Yeah, it was more doing project work. I'd say in high school and college, it was doing project work. I really enjoyed, telling stories and understanding why people did what they did. I loved going to sporting events, and I really enjoyed looking around arenas and seeing who the sponsors were. One of the things I loved about the Super Bowl was studying the Super Bowl ads, besides watching the Cowboys.
Yeah, great. So, but even though you were let into the world, it sounds like you had some difficulties or some some resistance you met, and that is the lack of experience or just the fact that you didn't go into it right away. So how did the grad school experience and how did that influence your ability to enter the workforce? Was that an easy transition?
No. So when I was, I took the right courses when I was in college. And when I graduated, I didn't go work for a entry-level marketing type role. Like I didn't do that role. And if I would have, I probably would have gotten there faster, but I didn't. And it was very hard to shift from one world to the other. And so what happened is I went from consulting world to a sales role. And then I actually ended up getting a job at Verizon in the marketing department. And back here in Dallas, I moved back from Chicago to Dallas, Texas. And that's when superpages.com launched. And that's when like the internet was on, when the Yellow Pages was going onto the internet back in the day. And I got to work for superpages.com and creating these marketing campaigns and how that worked. And along the same time, I really knew I wanted to get in the marketing world. And people are like, you don't have the real experience. I also knew I wanted to go back to graduate school and, pursue my MBA. I also feel like, graduate school and getting MBAs and advanced degrees now might be a little different than it was, 10, 12, 15 years ago. But back then, going after my MBA, I had a couple different choices of schools and where I applied, but had the opportunity to go to SMU, so Southern Methodist University here in Dallas. I got into SMU. I left Verizon and went to SMU. And I quickly realized my first year into the program, wow, I'm surrounded by some really smart people. And we all seem to be going after the same type of degree, marketing and strategy. And at the time, and probably still now, people who go to graduate school go for one of two reasons. One, they want more education. They think it's going to advance the career that they already have. Like they're going to go from manager to director to VP, right? That's their career track. Or they go to graduate school because they're trying to make a shift from being in finance to marketing, or from accounting to venture capital, or some variation thereof, right? They're making a fundamental shift in their career. And what I realized is for all intents and purposes, I have a consulting background and a sales background, and there's really nothing in my background that says I can go out and create real marketing campaigns and I can manage real budgets besides this little thing I've done at Verizon. And what's going to happen is I'm going to graduate from SMU. I'm going to have this piece of paper, and everybody I go to school with is going to have the same piece of paper, but everyone I go to school with also came from a marketing background. And they were associate brand managers at JCPenney. They worked at Frito-Lay. They worked at PepsiCo. They worked at insert brand here. And they were going to have a leg up on me. And so what I decided to do is go out and create my own experience. So I went down and I created my own little consulting company called Freestyle Marketing. I went down to the city of Dallas. I got a DBA, doing business as. I created a business card, and I really just started going out and hustling. I went through the SMU Career Center. I went and talked to alumni, and I basically said, I need to get some experience, some project experience. I'm in graduate school. I'm taking these incredible courses. I'm learning some great things. Who do you know? And I started doing marketing projects. And it didn't matter if it was for a local car wash, a local attorney, a dentist office, a doctor's office, insurance company, the regular thing that all freelancers do when they first start. Insert sole proprietor here. And that's honestly how I started. I went to every SMU alumni breakfast, luncheon, 7 a.m. business meeting thing they offered. And I was 25, living in an apartment, 1 bedroom with a plant, and, just going to school at night and hustling during the day, trying to find that next opportunity. And what I was really trying to do is build a portfolio. And I remember working for $20 an hour, $25 an hour, trying to find the thing. And, this is before Facebook. This is before Twitter. This is like before social really took off. And, there was email and you could connect with people. And I really leveraged the power of community, the power of the alumni network. And so I ended up finding a mentor who was about 5 years ahead of me from SMU. And he kind of took me underneath his wing. And he worked in the agency world. And he brought me on. I did a project for him. And they had a large pharmaceutical as a client, and the opportunity to come in and do a small project for them and at least put my name on it. And then all of a sudden I had a portfolio of, hey, these small little companies. I worked for this, agency here in Dallas. I worked for one of their big clients. I have my name on something. And then I used that to go out and find a full-time job upon graduation. My mentor helped me at the time, helped me find and parlay that into a full-time position. And then I was off and running into the agency world. And then I quickly found out at the time, this is, 2005, 2006, that you don't have to be very deep with your experience in the agency world. You just have to have something. Like people just want 3 months of something or 6 months of something. It's not like they require, 15 years experience to hire you. They just want to see you did something. You created a website, you ran a paid media campaign, you did X. And, that's what I went out and started to do.
Yeah, it's funny that, when you put it together, that's very similar to how I had gotten started in this area as well. Actually, I wasn't even convinced that I wanted to do marketing, but I knew that I wanted to be on my own, and I didn't go to the grad school route, but I basically knew that I could make websites. So I could write code that could make somebody a website, and I just went to everybody that I knew, and I was like, hey, I'm starting a business. Do you know anybody that needs a website? And the funny thing is when you start to do that, you start to plant seeds. You find that a lot of people need websites, and a lot of people are willing to take a chance on you if your price is right. If you have the determination to go out on your own, you don't even necessarily have to have a great skill. Your skill just needs to be better than that of the people who are paying you, or you just need to be good with the relationship to let them know what's happening, so you can learn as you go along. As long as you're ahead of the person or the company you're helping out.
Yes, you have to be better than the next person possible.
Yeah,
like that is your thing, and the old adage, the harder you work, the luckier you get. And in this world of marketing and advertising and consulting, like it is all relationships. Like that is all it is. And it really became this, who do you know that? And that whole game that I did in 2005 with freestyle and connecting with people and getting projects as a grad school student at 25 years old is literally the same model that I used in 2010 when I launched, my own agency in digital space. And it's the same model that I use with Rogue in 2016. Like it's all who do you know? Who can I connect with? How does this happen? Every client is literally based on relationships and, producing, good quality work and connections and keep talking.
Yep, absolutely. And I wrote about this on my blog, but basically as a practitioner, we all pretty much sound the same when we say that we do SEO or we say we do pay-per-click or whatever these things that we do. Everybody's website says pretty much the same things. And what differentiates is that somebody wants to work with you as the individual or you as the name of your company. So the best thing you can do is it's branding, it's simply branding. And that is when somebody says I need these services, you need to be the first one they think of.
It's you.
And when they do that, then you end up becoming the one who gets the work. And that's always sort of how I've gone about my agency world as well. It's just put out enough good stuff that when somebody needs help, they think of me first. And that goes a long way in the business of being in the agency world.
So when I started in the agency world, I worked for big, large Omnicom agencies, the 500 person, offices in New York and Chicago and San Francisco and took up 5 floors and like the whole thing. When I came out of grad school, I got the opportunity to work at those agencies, and I worked on the strategy team. And you'd walk in these meetings and with these clients, and you would sit there and listen. They would pitch ideas to clients, or they would talk about campaigns and outcomes. And the clients would say, hey, what did that do? How did this affect our business? We spent 50 grand, 100 grand, 200 grand, $1 million. Like, what happened? And they'd say, don't worry, look at this amazing website we built. Or look at this killer creative. Or isn't this print like the most amazing thing you've ever seen? And I realized that, wow, what an amazing smoke and mirrors world we live in of advertising agency world. And then when I left that side of the business, I went to what I call the nerd side of marketing, and started looking at the data side. And back then, like, data sort of existed, but it didn't really existed. Like, we didn't have this omniture Google Analytics, like, amazing world that we live in now, which is going to be even more amazing in like 5 or 10 years. But the point is, I think if you're starting out now and you're looking to get into something, you have one or two choices. You can either be a wandering generality, or you can be a meaningful specific. And the people who are looking for positions, or looking to get in consulting, or looking to get into freelance, I think they can either go and be brand consultants or marketing consultants or strategy. And I think that's a really tough sell now. I think that if you're going to get into this world, this advertising, marketing world, you have to be a meaningful specific, and you have to get a deep skill. So where I got not burned, but where I kept hitting this wall and I couldn't go any further in Omnicom or insert agency here at agency.com, Target Base, just wherever it was, I couldn't go above this wall, is because I was a wandering generality. I was a strategist, client account director, like, just, you were just a jack of all trades. And there's a ton of people who are like that.
Yep.
And that was me. And I was like, what is happening here? Like, why can't I'm like, I'm smart, I'm personable. Like, why does this keep happening? And it's because I didn't have that deep hard skill. And so that is another thing that propelled me. And now we're talking, 2008, 2009, and the world's best economy, that propelled me into, going deep into something, right? So PPC, SEO, analytics, content. You're either the wandering generality or the meaningful specific. So it's great that people want to get into this world, but they get into this world but go deeper into something else. So if your passion is writing, or if you're really good at the thing, which is writing, or you're really good at analytics, or you're really good at paid media, great. Go do that. Don't sit here and be great at 5 different things, because you'll never succeed at that.
Yeah.
Be good at the thing.
That's good advice. And I think that it's true that this happens all the time, is that people who are looking for jobs are often so general that they can't really define that one specific thing that they are good at. And yeah, you and I both had the misfortune of sort of being around in that down economy. Mm-hmm. And when that happens, and even though it's recovered in many ways to date, like the stocks and everything like that have recovered, there's still the mentality that you need to be accountable, and that you can't just go into things and not really have some kind of accountability. And accountability often comes with having either a specific skill or something that is there. So when positions are out there, it's for specific items, not for general. Now, I think as a generalist, you might be able to convince them that you can learn. But like you said, going in is specific, a meaningful specific. I think it's a great term to put there. And it's interesting. I've seen people do this 2 ways. Usually I've seen people who start out as a strategist, or who are in that account role, the sort of jack of all trades, and then they want to get specific, but I've rarely seen that be a successful thing that happens for whatever reason. I think it's because it's sort of hard to go from general to specific. But the other way around, if you are specific, like I started out my career then it's easier to go be general because you already have the confidence in what you've learned in that area, and then you just need to sort of appeal and sort of have the relationships behind it.
But I think that's the point. I think because it is easy. It's easy to be the generalist. You know what's hard? Analytics is hard. Setting up Google Tag Manager is hard. Running e-commerce is hard. Being a paid media person is hard, right? That's what separates people. It's being the wandering generality versus the person who does the thing. Like it's really hard. You have to study. You have to know your craft. Like that is hard. And that's what separates people. You have to have the thing that separates you. So I had this conversation a few weeks ago. Like if you're 26 years old right now or 24 years old, you've never lived through a down economy, right? You graduated high school. If you're 24, you graduated high school like as the economy was getting better. You never lived through a dot-com bust. You've lived in a post 9/11 world, right? You've never lived where it's been bad. If you're over 30 years old, you've now lived through it at least twice. Mm-hmm. How you view the world depends on where you sit. There's a line in the sand if you're 26 and under or you're 30 and over.
Yeah.
If you're wandering generality, generalist, and if your first job's out of college or your second, if you're 24, 25 and you're account manager, account supervisor, account coordinator, and you're not going down the road of specific into something, in 3 years, you're going to have a problem. And it's going to be hard. And the reason it's going to be hard is because you don't have hardcore skills. Like I was looking around when I was in 2008, 2009, I'm like, where's the hardcore skill? Like lawyers have hardcore skills. Doctors have hardcore skills. Engineers have hardcore skills. Where's the people in marketing with the hardcore skills? It's the data people, the analytics people. We have a young industry of 15, 20 years or 20 years of Google. And it's slowly coming around with paid media specialists, mobile conversion optimization, web developers, which has always been kind of a skill, but conversion optimization, paid media, analytics, content, search engine optimization, all of these tenets of you're known as the thing and you're the guy, you're the girl who does the thing. Like that's what you have to be known for. You don't have to be the best in the world. You just have to be the best in your world. And I think that's something that's really important for people to understand and grasp. And also for agencies. We had a conversation where, we were doing some rebranding and talking to, one of our clients, and we're like, hey, here's our new stuff and list out all of our services. And he's like, there's like 25 things on here. He's like, you don't do these 25 things. He's like, he just took his hand and covered up the logo. And he's like, this is every other agency. Find 3 things and just do those 3 things and just help me solve my business problems. And I'll think of you for those 3 things. And everybody else can do everything else. And that's what we did. And so at Rogue, we do 3 things and everybody else does everything else.
I've been on that side too, where at my agency, we were good at a lot of things. And then there's other things we were decent at, but people wanted them. So there's always that temptation with clients to try to do everything for them because they want to pay you to do it and they want you to do it. But you're right that most don't do it well. And what ends up happening is that it creates stress on the company and then the agency to do things that they're not very good at because it's not in their competency set and nobody even enjoys really doing it. And so I think that's good advice is to figure out who you are and what you're going to be. And that's both at an agency level and at a personal level. Question for you though is, okay, so you made this decision. Is it in your mind, it was pretty straightforward that you needed to have something tangible, something specific. What did you do? Did you get it on the job? How did you learn this? Did you go back to school again? Did you learn online? How did you go about targeting what that skill was and then getting to the point where you're comfortable with it?
So 2008, I ended at, in the world's best economy, housing market's crashing. There's really not a need, all these agencies, big layoffs. And, I was a victim of layoffs. And just like everybody else who works in the agency world, no real fault of my own. I was working for a great agency at the time, and our client made a change. We had an automotive client who was based in California. I was flying to LA 3 or 4 times a month. I was platinum on American. I was working like 50, 60 hours a week. And, things were great. It was honestly one of the best jobs I ever had in my entire life. And I'm like, I will stay here forever. That's what I really thought. I'm like, this is my thing. And the client made a change. They're like, hey, we need somebody to be here every day. We need somebody, more automotive, and we have to make a change. And the agency, 80% of the revenue came from the auto manufacturer. And so they cut us. And so as a result, I got cut. And, and at the same time, our first kid was born, and 12 weeks earlier. And so you have me and my wife sitting at home with a 12-week-old, and my wife's on maternity leave. So you have these, a lot of time for us to spend with our first kid, which was great. And so we're just like literally sitting around staring at each other like, wow, this is fantastic. What are we going to do? And we had a real heart-to-heart conversation about this agency game is over. Like going and working for big agencies, and every 3 to 5 years, it's the same thing. And I started really looking on LinkedIn. I'm like, is it me or is it the industry? And I started really having real conversations with people. So I would go through LinkedIn and look at people above me, who I follow. And I'm like, I want to be like this guy, this girl. And I started noticing, I'm like, wow, 3 years they're here. And then 3 more years they're here. And 5 years they're here. I'm like, am I really going to be 45, 50 years old? And I'm going to go through like 6 different agencies, and my kids are going to be 3 years old, and I'm going to have another one. And then like, they're going to be in high school, and then I'm going to lose my job, and they're going to college. And I'm like, is this really how it's going to play out? Because I'm a planner. And I'm like, and I started thinking, I'm like, oh, they're going to high school, and they're going to be 9 and 14, and then this is going to happen, and then tuition's going to be due. I'm like, is this really how it's going to be? And I'm like, I can't. I'm like, I'm just done. And, I was also the wandering generality. And so my next logical move, if I were to stay in the agency world, was go be account director, go be client partner at insert big agency here. Like, no brainer, submit your resume, start working within a couple of weeks. Like, that's what would have happened. Mm-hmm. And, that's a hard temptation to fight. Like, that's a good salary. Like, why not just do that? And so I'm like, no, I have to go get a hardcore skill. And I really like the internet marketing stuff and going deep. And it's a step back. Like, you go from working on big automotive companies and, big brands to, hey, I'm going to go work with Single Doctor and do your marketing campaign. That's an exercise in humility, right? You're 30 something years old and you've been platinum on American, and, it's a humbling experience, to say the least. And so I did. And I'm like, where am I going to get this experience? And so I started hustling again, just like I did after grad school. So just like everyone did back then, I went SEO and local SEO and website optimization. I'm not a coder or developer by any means, but I'm like, what does it take to get websites to rank? And I started doing it for small companies, and then more companies, and then bigger companies. And just like everybody else does, hey, what can I do for $500, and then $1,000, and then $2,000, and then $5,000, and then $5,000, and slowly started growing and growing and growing. And that's how I started. And it was hard because, you get the offer or the interview from insert big company here or big brand here. Hey, come work for us. Here's your salary. Here's your benefits. There's a baby in the other room. Your wife's going back to work. Like, that's hard. And hey, here's a check for $500 versus here's a paycheck. And that's a hard thing to swallow for a couple of years. And, luckily I have a very, supportive family, and we found a way to make it work. And, I hustle and grinded and I still hustle and grind for years.
Yeah.
And still put in my, tons of hours.
That's a great story. I mean, when you think about it, you summed it up exactly what people go through when they go through this process. And that is that you want to learn a skill, and there's not there's not people lining up to give you that skill. There's people who will help you maybe obtain that skill if you have a certain amount of knowledge and you're patient and they think they can use whatever you have to their advantage. So there's a financial arrangement that's really just getting employed, and then but the learning of these skills is so important that when you think about it, starting halfway or starting a little bit into it and then taking a job, it really stunts that knowledge and that growth opportunity. So you have two conflicting forces. One is not getting paid a ton of money, but doing something you love and doing something that you think you're growing your skills and you're exercising your passion. Or the other thing is the easy money, the money people, because people will offer you, even if you didn't have a lot of job offers right when the economy tanked or whatever, at some point they'll see what you're doing and say, hey, I'd like that. And that, so there's a lot of temptation there. The ability to resist that and to stay independent and to go through those points is really hard. I've been, even now I'm still faced with that conflict all the time. It's like, do I continue to do this or, do I take the easy route and get the job? And so it sounds, yeah, exactly. And I think we both sort of resisted that. And now, years later, I think it's the right move, but it's very difficult in the middle of it to know if it's the right move or not.
My biggest fear, what kept me motivated, was the fear of another layoff. Like that is what kept me, because I was completely blindsided. And sitting there with a 3-month-old is one of the most humbling, gut-wrenching life experiences ever.
Yeah.
And that is probably my number one most motivating factor ever, is I was like, I cannot let this happen again. He is 3 months old. I know we'll have another, and that was our first kid. I'm like, we'll probably have another, and we have another. We have a daughter now. So they're 6 and 3. And I will never forget, it was June 12th, 2009. Like, I will never, ever forget that date where I was, like, what happened. It was probably one of the most humbling days of my entire life. And the other thing that I think is important is that, back then there was no startup real community, these collaborative co-working spaces, all these meetups. Like, the opportunities to learn, I think, are there, especially if you work in these like big cities. If you're in insert small city here, probably not as big, but if you're in a major metropolitan area, the opportunities are around you. And I don't think everyone has to live in Silicon Valley. Like, that's not the case. You can live in, Oklahoma City has an amazing startup community, and they're in Middle America. So Oklahoma City, Nashville, Knoxville, Tulsa, Tampa, Florida, Baltimore, Maryland. Like, you don't have to live in New York, LA, Chicago, Dallas, Houston. Like, there are other places in the country. And to be able to go into these, just to go online and look for meetup groups that have words like WordPress, internet marketing, paid media, and just go to those, or Google Analytics, and walk into a startup or an incubator or a tech accelerator and be like, I am looking for just some marketing experience. I just need access to a Google Analytics account, just a user access. Like, it's all I want. So I can just start pulling reports and seeing what data means. I want admin or editor access to a WordPress blog, so I can figure out how to create pages, edit pages, add Yoast as an SEO plugin, update meta tiles and descriptions. I need to find somebody who has Moz, so I can start, doing SEO reports or start contributing to like the Moz blog and, participating in their little community. Like, there are places to create opportunities of experience that did not exist 5-10 years ago. If you have a MacBook and an iPhone, you can create opportunities galore. I think that, people create their own opportunities. The harder you work, the luckier you get. And people always say, oh, I guess you were, wow, you're really lucky and fortunate to land X client. Well, I guess I was really lucky because I went to a meeting at 9:00, or I guess I was really lucky because I didn't sit there and watched, House of Cards for 14 hours on a Saturday right? So people create their own luck. And I think that's something that, if this is your job and this is your passion, and if you're looking to make this and this is your after hours thing, then fine, go to your regular day job. And then at night, go to every meetup Monday through Thursday night, and then go to the Saturday morning WordPress group. But pull out your calendar and say, on Mondays, I'm going to the WordPress. On the third Wednesday of every month, I'm going to DFW SEM. Or on the fourth Thursday, I'm going to Social Media Dallas. Like this is literally what I do and what I did when I was starting. I'm going to the launch DFW on next Thursday. Like I have it planned out. I literally still go to events, and I remember back in 2009, 2010, 2011, 2012, every night was an event. Every night.
Yep.
And that is what it takes. Like you're never going to sit at home and no one's going to automatically call you up and be like, I was just thinking, you sound awesome. I've never seen you. Would you like to come work for me?
Yeah.
Not going to happen. And so, it comes from creating your own opportunities. And these events are fantastic and they're everywhere. I've seen lots of people like on Twitter with these Twitter chats. I've seen people who have been on Twitter, participate in Twitter chats, turn those into participating in podcasts, turn those into video podcasts, turn those into guest blog opportunities, and turn those into paid contributions just by sharing their thoughts.
Yeah, and it all starts the same way too, and that is, people always get worried about it because they see the people, like you said, you want to emulate the people you want to be like, see what they did. But people going into this get afraid because they're like, I'm not as good as that person. But what we don't realize is that person, you're only seeing the product of where they are today. You're
Exactly.
not seeing the 5 years of struggle, the time that they went to these meetings, the times that they were unsure, the times that they didn't know people. I used to go to these networking meetings, and I didn't know a single person. And I'm an introvert, and so I sometimes would just not talk to a single person. I'd just have a glass of wine and then leave. And then by the end of it, by the end of years of doing this, I can't go to one of these events without knowing every single person there because I put in that work, I put in that time, and built those relationships. But it's not like an overnight thing. And that's people always see the end result and assume that it's just easy or natural. None of this stuff is really very natural either.
It's all hard.
It's all hard.
It's all hard.
And it just comes down to making that commitment that this is what I want to do and that this is important to me and this is more important than the other things. And if it isn't, then don't make that decision, right? You don't have to do these things, but there are certain benefits that come from it. One is that you probably could get any job now, even though,
right.
Maybe at one point the jobs weren't calling for you. If you wanted, you could get any job now. Or you're getting clients. You're meeting people that are your clients, not just while they're at one company, but if they go through that 3 to 5 year window that you're talking about, where they're moving on every 3 to 5 years, the next time they go to a new job, who are they calling up? Who are they calling? Who are they looking up? You, because of that relationship.
It's all hard. Everybody thinks that Adam Levine from Maroon 5 just shows up at AT&T Stadium in Dallas, Texas, and just puts on a show. Like, that doesn't happen. The years of dedication, the years of work, the daily grind he goes through with Maroon 5 to make things happen, for the opportunity to sell out a place like that, or sell out Madison Square Garden or the United Center. Like, nobody shows up and sells out Madison Square Garden to start.
Yep.
It doesn't happen.
And I have to tell my Adam Levine Maroon 5 story now that you brought it up, because when I was in college at St. Thomas in Minnesota, they were our spring concert. No, they weren't even our spring concert. They played like our 200-seat auditorium, and we got them for $5,000. And it was before they turned big. And so my friend, who was really into music, he found them on mp3.com. They were like one of the top downloads. And he started talking to him, and he said, hey, I'd love to have you come and play here. Adam Levine was on mp3.com message boards talking to every single person there saying, listen to my song. He was a hustler. He was going out there trying to get everything to happen. And it's not my type of music, what they've become, but the fact that they're doing it, it just proves that, none of that stuff really came to them. They worked really hard.
You show me an overnight success, and I'll show you 10 years of somebody busting their ass.
Yeah.
I think we've all been there. It's late. You've been working all day, and like it's 6 o'clock. Do I want to go home and watch, a Mavs game or college basketball or college football? Or do I want to go put on a happy face and go to a networking event from 7 p.m. till 10 p.m. or go to a dinner that starts at 9 o'clock? Like, what's my choice? But I go because you never know who you're going to meet, and you never know who's going to be in that room.
Yeah. And so that's probably a good transition point. So obviously you've done this and you've gotten to the point where you're successful. You have a good agency that's running, and I'd like to talk about your agency after this one. But how did you turn into the education piece then? How did you become involved with educating people in this area?
So I've been given an opportunity, and I still call it an opportunity, to be an adjunct on the adjunct faculty of Southern Methodist University. I teach in the MBA program, and I teach a course called Social Media Entrepreneurship. And the idea of the course is it's built into the strategy and entrepreneurship concentration, and it helps the MBA students bring practicality to their startup ideas. So how do they leverage social and digital to launch their startups? Not everybody has $1 million budget. So not everybody has, the backing of large corporation or large brands, to bring a product to market. So traditionally, when you're in the MBA program or MBA programs overall, majority of people come through MBA programs, they go work at big corporations. And if you come out and you work at P&G or Frito-Lay or PepsiCo or Ford, and one of those companies says, hey, we're launching a new product, here's $1 million, go spend it. It's very hard to mess that up, right? It's incredibly difficult.
Mm-hmm.
But not everybody has that luxury. And so some people who come out of graduate school are like, I'm going to go work in startup world, or you know what, I have a real passion and I have a really good idea. I need to know how to put that into, in the world. So how do I start this company? How do I leverage digital and social channels? Which ones do I use? Which levers do I pull? How do I connect and engage and work within this ecosystem? And so I've created this course to help that process happen. And so how the class actually happened is SMU was listening, and they were following their alumni on social channels, Twitter and LinkedIn. And they saw me, and I graduated the MBA program in 2005. And in 2012, they're like, hey, it looks like you've been doing some freelancing, consulting, and, would you mind coming in and sharing your story with as a guest lecturer to one of our starting a business courses? And I'm like, why would I not do that? Why would I not want to be in front of SMU students and alumni and business owners? Like, that seems like a very, a target-rich environment. And so I went in and told my story, and they're like, hey, that was really good. Would you like to come in and do it again? And I'm like, yes, I would. And so I went back and did it again, and went back the next semester, and I kept working on my presentation and finding new ideas and concepts, and told my story 4 or 5 times. And they're like, hey, would you like to turn this into a course? And I'm like, yes, I would. And I turned it into a course, and so I had the opportunity to start teaching there in 2014. It went well. And now I'm coming, 2014, 2015, and now I'm coming back in 2016 to teach the course again.
That's great. Yeah, there's a lot of risk there, but that's similar to how mine started. I did I talked to the MBA program at St. Thomas a few times, and then they said, do you want to develop a program? Now, they didn't give me I didn't have as much risk as you. They just said, we're going to have a program, but sort of a wild story that's what you had to go through. But it sounds like it's going well, and if they keep on having you back, that's always the first good sign. And then the cool thing about it is just to see where people are able to go from there. What they're able to do with the information you give them, and does it give them business ideas or help them? Maybe a startup becomes a path for them as opposed to a traditional path they might be looking for.
Yeah, and I try and make it as practical as possible. I don't make it fictitious. So when you come in, one of the assignments is, hey, at the end, we're going to obviously create a marketing plan for, our startups. But I don't say, hey, you have $1 million, right? You have $25,000 or $50,000. And so you're because it is MBA and graduate school, let's pretend you have a little bit of investor money. Let's pretend somebody, there's a little bit of seed money there. What's our go-to-market positioning strategy? What's our digital roadmap? What are we accomplishing over the next 3, 6, 12 months? There's 1,000 different things we could do online. What are the top 3 to 5 that make sense? So we do make it very practical, and we actually pull in from other classes they would have taken. So finance, accounting, equity. So I do make it as practical as possible. And I try and make it so when they leave this course and they're out in the business world, whether they go corporate or start something, at least they have a tool and a framework to go back to and say, hey, here's 15, 20, 50, 100 different digital tools I could leverage or resources. And here's 10, 15, 20 different tactics I might be able to implement in starting my concept. What's interesting is taking my curriculum and my syllabus from last year, and literally how 30% of it has already changed from last year. And the tools that we're talking about this semester are just different from last year. So
yeah, it sounds very practical what they're learning, and I think that's also I try to build that into the learning that I put out there, and that is this is always changing. So we need to focus more on concepts than we do on absolutes.
Yes.
And so, speaking of getting acquired or sort of that piece of it, let's sort of talk a little bit about you had talked about freelancing and doing some of the stuff on your own and building a company out of it. And then obviously you've built up a company, and now at the end of last year, you merged with another company. Can you tell us a little bit more about how that works and what you do at the company and everything?
Yeah, so we actually just it was a partner, and we brought our agencies together. We found out that we were better together. So I started Digital Space. That was my previous company. I started that in 2010, the end of 2010. Been growing, and I always come from the digital and the strategy and very tactical side of things. So the SEO, PPC, social side. Along the way, I had the opportunity to meet the team from Rogue, and they had come from branding and corporate and storytelling and content. And about 3 years ago, we had started pitching projects together. I had find opportunities, or they found one. They're like, hey, we should kind of pitch this together. We should do this together. So me and the gentleman from Rogue, we actually had an opportunity to work on a consulting project together for another firm for about 9 months together. And he was in their leadership, and I was a consultant for them, and we both left that firm, and we kept in touch. And we found out that we had very complementary skills. And so I was really good at digital and tactical. He was really good at storytelling and content. And along the way, the last couple of years, we found out that we were really better together. So we started pitching, and in the beginning, we'd lose. And then we'd pitch again, and we'd win something, and then we'd lose something. And then we started finding our way. And we'd start pitching and winning and pitching and winning and pitching and winning. And then in 2014 and 2015, we were sharing 3-4 clients together that were on retainer. And I'm like, well, we should probably find a way to bring this together, because what was happening is every month I was writing him a check from Digital Space. He was writing me a check from Rogue. And I'm like, well, the only person who's winning in this situation is the IRS. Let's find a way not to do that. And so that's when we made the agreement and started looking into the process of merging our agencies, and got the correct parties involved, and did everything possible. And we officially launched in January to bring everything underneath the Rogue name in 2016.
That's great. So. Sounds very similar to how I merged my consultancy with 3D back in the day.
Yeah.
We just had so much synergy together that we ended up joining forces, because obviously sometimes you're better off with a team as opposed to going at it alone. So I feel like if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And honestly, when I was freelancing and doing my thing, and I looked around, I kept coming up against this wall, either
I could only handle this amount of clients, or I could only grow to this amount of revenue, or I could only handle this amount of monthly retainer, like on my own. And what would happen is you try and outsource what you can and, bring on a team and manage that. But when you start doing that, your margins just keep shrinking. So you're putting out all this effort and work, but your margins keep getting smaller. I'm like, well, the only person who's winning this is A, the contractor, and B, the client. And you keep losing because your margins keep shrinking. And I'm like, well, this is a very bad business decision. And so there was no real efficiencies, and there was no way to kind of break through to that next level of retainer, next level of client. Because if you wanted that next level of client, that they weren't going to hire the individual shop.
Yep.
You had to be bigger than yourself.
Yes.
And this was an opportunity to do that. And that's one of the reasons we started, when we started doing that and figuring that out about 3 years ago, when we pitched bigger than ourselves, that's when we started winning.
Yep. Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's exactly how it goes, is that you need to believe that you're big enough to take it on. And then, I remember back in the day when we were 5 people and we walked into the room with would be a Fortune 50 company. And they said, how big is your team? And we had rehearsed beforehand. We said, no matter what they say, we're going to say 12. Yeah. But we needed to believe that that's where we were, because that's just a certain type of business that they can't handle the liability of one person. Because if one person gets hit by a bus or one person doesn't do what they need to do, there's no redundancy. And so they're willing to pay the money for that redundancy. But the point on margins, absolutely well taken.
Nobody ever got fired bringing in IBM to solve a business problem. But somebody's going to get fired if they bring in Bob, the consultant.
Yep.
And so when you deal with CMOs or someone in a director level, their job generally is to try and not get fired. Honestly, like that's what they're trying to do, and it's to make good business decisions on behalf of their companies and organizations.
Yeah.
So fundamentally, if they have to choose between well-established company and looking at website and look at this amount of team and look at their work product, or Bob's consulting firm, which one are they going to go with? And so they have to be able to back that up in a meeting. If things go right or go wrong, there has to be a story to tell. So nobody's getting fired if they bring in IBM, Accenture, KPMG, right? That's not happening. But even if the person who worked at Accenture left and started their own thing and went up against Accenture, Accenture's still getting the work over the person who would have done the work had they worked at Accenture.
Yeah, no, that's a harsh yet realistic point of view as to how it works. I mean, that's just, it makes perfect sense when you look at the psychology behind those decisions. All right, well, we're just about out of time, and I just wanted to ask one last question. What advice do you have to a new marketer?
The biggest thing is to get a deep skill in something, whether it's analytics, development, content, paid media, whatever the thing is that you're going to do. You don't have to be the best in the world, just be best in your world. I had a friend, and their idea, I thought this was genius, for starting a business. They were like a development shop. He's like, yeah, I'm not going to get an office. He's like, I'm just going to get a desk at every co-working space in Dallas, and 5 of them, and I'm just going to rotate every day of the week because then I'm just known everywhere. I'm like, that is really, really smart. And it just comes from being around, like just being present. And I think it's really important that you just show up.
Yep.
Like that's really how it starts, is show up, participate, meet somebody. And that's the beauty of Twitter. You can just passively participate and then start with, hey, I saw you on Twitter. People love that. So
yeah,
that's a good place to start.
Exactly. I think that it's marketing. I mean, the funny thing is your own personal career is marketing, and the person with the WordPress there's somebody in the co-working spaces in Twin Cities that does the same thing. He just sets up shop, and he has employees, and they have different desks and his signs there, and he goes where the fish are, and that's what marketing is, right? He goes where there's people who are lined up who have that problem. And so even though it might not seem like it might not be fitting our traditional definition of marketing, that's what people do that are successful. It's structured serendipity, right? It's they're not just lucky. They're fortunate that they're in a position where they can do that, but it's good fortune that comes from sort of manufacturing your own luck.
When I was starting, I would literally lay in bed and watch YouTube videos, SEO videos at night, or watch, before I could go to MozCon, they used to put them out DVD sets, and I still have like a MozCon from like 4 years ago. And I just sat there and watched it. Like I ordered it for like $300 and bought it. And like, that was my education, right? Like I paid to do that. I paid money in my own pocket to go to PubCon. Like that's how it started. I think it's also important to, find those people to listen to and follow on a daily basis. So I started with the Seth Godin, who's my hero. I read Seth Godin every day. I listen to Gary Vaynerchuk every day. Jay Baer. These people that everybody, there's talent there, and they are amazing people, and they're charismatic, and they're super smart, but they're just kind of putting it all together. Kind of like Adam Levine played, for your little college, and now he's selling out Madison Square Garden. Like there's just a process there that everybody sees the people up on stage, but nobody understands what it took to get there.
Yep. Well, I think that we sort of peeled back the onion a little bit as to what we need to go through in order to get there. And so I think we've really given people a lot to think about and a lot of really good information and specific examples. So I really appreciate you joining me on the podcast today, James.
My pleasure. And I really enjoyed it. And I love talking about this stuff and, giving real practical examples and real practical experiences. So thank you very much for having me.
Wow, so many actionable sound bites and pieces of advice from my talk with James. It's hard to choose one lesson that was learned among the many. But if I were to choose one, it would be to get a deep skill and become a meaningful specific instead of a wandering generality. This is something that I believe in as well, but I really like the terms that James uses to describe the differences. That's probably why he's such a good educator. We wish success to James and his new company and look forward to future updates.
Let's face marketing reality. If you wanna be considered terrific, instead of wondering generality, becoming meaningful, specific. Easy fame is hard to find. Go ask Mr. Adam Levy. You always have to hustle and grind. Go meetups to CNBC. So if you're fired, don't feel blue. Might be the best thing ever happened to you. There's so much to do.